Welcome to Alpine Daily for a Friday. This Sunday we're starting a brand new series at Alpine called Nehemiah, and it's a study of the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. And Nehemiah is a great story for us to look at the beginning of a new year, the beginning of 2013, because the book is all about grabbing hold of the purpose that God has called us to in life, both as individuals and as a church, and that's what we want to do in this series. But the book of Nehemiah tells this incredible story about this guy and how he was a leader in Israel. And the book of Nehemiah offers us a bunch of really impressive leadership principles. People have studied the book of Nehemiah not only to grow spiritually, but to learn how to be a leader, a godly leader. And that's what we also see reflected in the life of Nehemiah. And as I was reading chapter 1 and getting ready for this week and really reading the whole book, one of those leadership principles stood out to me from the book of Nehemiah, and I wanted to share it with you today. So in Nehemiah 1:4, this is what we read. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Now, if you are with us Sunday or join us online for our sermon on Nehemiah 1, you're going to know the context of this, what it was that broke Nehemiah's heart and which made him so sad and wanting to mourn and to weep. It was the destruction of Jerusalem and its current state in his day. But notice what he does. He's given some bad news, some news that is going to change the direction of his life forever. That really, by hearing this bad news, Nehemiah, his understanding of life is forever changed. But what does he do when he's faced with this bad news? He prays before the God of heaven. He says that he sat down and he wept. For some days he mourned and fasted and prayed. And if you read Nehemiah chapter 1 and Nehemiah chapter 2, you realize for 4 months Nehemiah prayed before God about what was troubling him and what was on his heart. You see, Nehemiah chapter 1 is about Nehemiah learning about what God's purpose is for his life and preparing to go and take hold of that purpose, which we read about for the rest of the book. But in chapter 1, before he does that, he spends a lot of time with God, just talking to God and praying to the God of heaven. And what this teaches us is the first leadership principle in the book of Nehemiah, that prayer is an essential foundation for leadership. I think that's something for us all to realize. Now, most of us, maybe all of us, aren't going to be leading a large group of people like a nation, but many of us find ourselves as leaders. If you're a parent, you're certainly a leader, or a husband, you're a leader. In your small group, maybe you're a leader. In your ministry at church, and the fact that you make disciples, if you make disciples, then you are definitely a leader on a certain level. And what the book of Nehemiah reminds us is that prayer is an essential foundation for leadership, that if we're going to be leaders, we're going to lead people, then we need to have a strong prayer life. And like Nehemiah, spend some serious time wrestling with the big issues of our lives, wrestling with those in prayer before God. That's what Nehemiah did, and that's what God wants us to do. So as we start 2013, it's always a good time for renewal and refocus, and I would encourage you, commit to growing your prayer life in 2013. Just one of the many leadership lessons we learned from the book of Nehemiah.